We've really got to get ourselves on the journey of the transformation that we need to become a big team. It's exciting, and I think if we get the right energy behind us, then we can shortcut this journey, with this incredibly ambitious journey we have, to the goals that we have, which is, we're not messing around. We're here to win races and world championships.
Welcome everybody to this week's F1 Beyond the Grid. I'm delighted to say that we are joined by F1's newest team principal, Jonathan Wheatley. Jonathan, it's great to have you on the show. You're looking well, you're looking excited.
Firstly, thank you very much, Tom. I know it's taken us a little while to try to get together in the same room. Thanks for your patience. I am excited. There's there was a decision to make in my career at one point, whether I carried on with the team that I was at previously for another X amount of time, whether it was time to really get out of my comfort zone and get involved in a really exciting project, and that's where I find myself now.
So, how are you settling in at Sauber? What are your first impressions?
I think my first impressions are sort of life in Switzerland. So my wife and I moved there about 4.5 weeks ago now. Absolutely loving our time there. It's a beautiful country. And then I would say that from the moment I started at Sauber, just an incredibly friendly group of people. Everyone's excited about the Audi F1 project, about becoming a big team, having been a small team for so long, and just sort of, I wouldn't say surviving. I think people are a little bit unkind when they say that. They've fielded 2 racing cars for the last 30 odd years in Formula One. And they're excited about what working for a proper works factory team will feel like.
That begs the question, doesn't it? What are the biggest differences between Sauber now and Red Bull, where you've just come from?
Well, one of them's in Switzerland. The other one's in Milton Keynes. It's very, very different. I'm reminded of when I moved from Renault F1 to Red Bull back in 2006, that there's a great spirit, but the defined structures of how a racing team works when it becomes a big team, the way you think as a big team compared with being a smaller team, and the overall and overarching strategy for the next few years, very, very different outlooks.
I mean, that's fascinating. Can we start with facilities? How short are you at the moment? How high is the mountain that you've got to climb to get yourselves on an even footing with a team like Red Bull?
Well, the facility is important, and it's all part of our, very bold expansion plan. What I would say is that the biggest issue we face is headcount's increasing and office space isn't. So there's a lot of people crammed into small spaces at the moment, but there's an expansion plan underway. In fact, I'm moving my office when I get back from here to another building further up the road. And there's a plan in place. I think that whole feel and look of a campus will be a great message for the team. It will show the team this is happening and we're on the journey.
You talk about sort of the mentality of the team, the culture of the team. How difficult is it to change the culture and turn it into a winning mentality?
I believe that a team is greater than the number of people in it. I genuinely believe that if the team has the right mental attitude, if there's the right energy, the culture's correct, that you can achieve incredible things and you can overperform. Now, I've loved working in those teams. I've worked in teams where that happens absolutely every day, and where we are at Sauber is we have to make sure that happens in every single department, every single day. Everyone's pulling together as one team. And that's why these transformations don't just take place in 6 months or 8 months. It takes years for it to happen.
What is the secret to a winning team? Is it all about the people and the culture rather than just the facilities?
I'm incredibly fortunate to be sat here having played my part in those championships. I think it's 154 race wins over my time, and the 7 DHL back-to-back pit stop championships. Now, I say played my part because it's an enormous group of people that has to come together to make any of those things happen. I had a choice in my career at one point where I could decide whether I went down the chief engineer route or team manager route, and I made a decision at that point that actually where my energy comes from is from a team environment, a team that's buzzing, full of energy, full of creative ideas, knowing exactly how to channel them. And I see my job then as helping people achieve those dreams and helping them achieve those ambitions, guiding people on the journey, and that energy of working with an excited Formula One team, there's nothing like it in the world.
What kind of personality succeeds in Formula One, do you think?
I think it's a positive mental outlook, positive energy from within, creativity. And I think if you're working for the right management structure and your manager supports you in those ideas and there's an energy in each of the departments, then this becomes a greater than the individual. And, I found this at every point in my career, and every time I've had a chance to be involved in the transition of a team, it's creating the right environment for people to thrive. And that environment is absolutely vital, because you can have the best simulators, you can have the best wind tunnel, you can have the best machinery, but if everyone walks out of the factory, all you've got is equipment. It's the people that make the team.
And I know you've only been at the team just over a month, but what is your management style? Are you here just to empower people? Is that how you see the most important part of your role?
I think I can see immediately there's some short-term support that I can give the team. I can see where some current procedures, processes, reporting structures could maybe be adapted a little bit, make sure people understand exactly what their role is, where it begins and ends, their responsibilities. But I think at the moment, we've got to make this transition from a small team to a big team. So I think actually that strategy of being able to talk the team through the problems that are going to happen over the next 3, 4, 5 years that they're not ready for yet, and get ourselves ready for that. I think actually we can probably accelerate that process as a result of it. And I'm working side by side with Mattia on this, and we share the same vision.
You mentioned Mattia Binotto, CEO. How are you two rubbing along, and what is the split of your roles?
So Mattia and I, we've known each other a really long time. Some people remember that Red Bull had Ferrari engines in 2006.
Well, that's going back, yeah.
So that's when I first met Mattia. He was in charge of the engine program there, and we got on brilliantly. And I'd visit him in Maranello and what have you. And our relationship is really super easy. I just don't think we're vastly interested in the areas of the business that each of ours are specialised in. So Mattia's job is a big one. It's really important. He's overall responsible for bringing chassis and powertrain together, creating the ultimate Audi Formula One car. And my job, if you like, when that leaves the factory, I take responsibility, me and my team take responsibility from it there. We run it at the racetrack, and my role's more commercial, communications, and the race operations.
While we're talking sort of personalities and jobs, I'm reminded of a great quote from Ron Dennis. Welcome to the Piranha Club is how he described the sort of top echelon of Formula One. How have you found it? Is it the Piranha Club? Now that you're a boss yourself, is that how you're viewing it? How has the establishment welcomed you?
I think that I've been at a high level in Formula One for some time now. I know all the team principals. We've had our laughs and jokes in the pit lane. Some of them I get on really well with, socialise with some of them anyway. My welcome has been very warm so far. I have no doubt that we're all very, very competitive people, and at some point, the teeth have to come out. But at the moment, I think people have been incredibly welcoming.
You mentioned Mattia, being in charge of bringing the Audi Formula One program together. Let's talk about Audi. I mean, you're a car guy. You're a Formula One guy, but you're also a car guy. How excited are you that Audi are coming in?
I have to sort of start from the beginning to answer that one. I've been massively fascinated with cars ever since I was a kid. My father raced cars. I raced karts. I was always interested in how things worked. So I was always the kid who was taking things apart, not quite putting them back together again properly, building models, car models, aircraft models and what have you. And I've always sort of worked with my hands and tried to understand the job from beginning to end, if you like. I was watching Group B rallying as a kid. Those pictures of Quattros smashing, the video footage of them smashing through forests and what have you, Michel Mouton, Hannu Mikkola, Walter Roll, they're absolute legends. The hair stands up on the back of my neck just thinking about it. But not just that, all the way through my childhood, IMSA, Audi's presence was there at every single level, and then the dominance in world endurance. and I'm talking about it with an excitement because I had the opportunity to further my career in the UK. I didn't need to. I had options, but nothing came even close to the excitement of being part of the Audi F1 project. I mean, I get excited about it. I'm still excited about it. I went to visit Audi Tradition and look at all the old Quattros. I want a Quattro. I will get one at some point. Probably something that I have to restore, I should imagine. And it's that whole ethos of Audi, I think, that I'm excited about.
Didn't you get a Quattro from Audi for day one? I was told that you drove a Quattro from home to Hinwil on day one.
Well, there are some advantages to being a team principal, and I'd never driven a Audi Sport Quattro. And for anyone who loved Group B rallying like I have and loves road cars like I have, there was the opportunity to drive one around on the day that I started at Sauber. But the funny thing was, so I phoned them up and I said, look, is it possible? They said, yeah, sure. Which colour? We've got a black one, a green one, a brown one, a red one. So, I chose a white one. And yeah, it was kind of like a childhood dream to drive that car, to be honest.
Now, what came first, this passion for cars you talk about, or Formula One? You say Dad raced. I mean, can you remember the first time you saw a Formula One car live?
Yeah, I think I was probably 2 years old at Silverstone. I mean, I grew up in the sort of the era of the sort of late 70s, early 80s of Formula One. As I got older in the sport, Dad would probably be racing in one of the support races or would be at the Grand Prix. And back in those days, you just had to make your own entertainment. So my brother, myself, my friends, we would never have grandstand tickets. We'd climb up the back of the scaffolding, watch the race from the top. I think we even watched the start of a Grand Prix from the bridge over the start line once at Silverstone. I always saw Formula One as this unattainable echelon of the sport, just something I'd never be a part of, but I'd always be a fan of. I read everything I could about it. My father bought from Richard Atwood, the Le Mans winner, his entire collection of bound autosport magazines. I used to read those, sit in Dad's office, reading those. I mean, I just immersed myself in the culture of motor racing. And Formula One, for me, that's where my heroes were.
So you grew up around motorsport. That is what is coming through.
Yeah, so Dad raced everything from Lotus Cortinas, GT40s, Lola T70s, Can-Am cars. I was just always helping his mechanics on the cars or getting in the way or trying to understand how things worked. I was at the track probably doing tyre pressures when I was 9-10 years old, listening to drivers, listen to Dad explain the problems he had with his cars and what have you. And I guess I've just been immersed in racing. And then I started racing myself. I can still, if I sit here now, I can still remember accelerating out the pit lane at Hoddesdon at Rye House Kart Circuit. I can still remember it now and that incredible thrill of motor racing.
And who were you racing back then? Because you've got this posse of mates now, right? I'm thinking of Dario Franchitti, David Coulthard. Were you racing karts against those guys?
They were. David's just a little bit younger than me. I know he doesn't look it. So my racing came to an end sort of when I was around 16 years old. I've got some quite interesting entry books when you look back at it, kart circuit entry books with all sorts of interesting names in it. Johnny Herbert was racing back then as well. I met most of these guys in karting, and they've formed lifelong friendships. Dario Marino, David Coulthard. I've known these guys since I was a kid, and we were, in between sessions, kicking footballs around and what have you.
And you're now having curries together. Are you the founding member of the Beaconsfield in the UK Curry Club? Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I don't normally want to fully take responsibility for something, but when you travel as much as I do, and with Dario and his schedule in the US, this is a group of really close friends, and it's really difficult to keep in touch with everyone. So we came up with this idea that we would have a curry every week. We were all in the UK, and sometimes that's twice a month, sometimes it's once a month, but it's a fantastic group of people. We've known each other a long time, and for me, this sport's all about the friendships you make along the way, the people you meet. I'm a people person, and I absolutely love it. And actually one of the toughest bits about being in Switzerland is I don't get to see these guys, but we live our life by WhatsApp now.
Well, when I think of you and I compare you to all of the other team principals on the grid, you are the longest serving F1 person, right? We have to go back to the French Grand Prix at Magny-Cours in 1991 to get your first Grand Prix. That was with Benetton. You were working on Roberto Moreno's car. I think you were
well remembered.
Yeah, front end mechanic.
Yeah.
What kind of 24-year-old were you? Were you nervous before that first race?
No, I was 23, I think, and cocky. You know, I was confident of my ability as a mechanic. I was confident that, I'd been restoring cars, I'd been creating parts for cars, I'd been fabricating, welding, machining. I could build a car myself, not in the way that a Gordon Murray type person would, but I could physically build a car, I can do the jig work. So I was confident in my ability when I went in. What I wasn't confident about was that, I saw everyone at that level, at this incredibly high level, and I wasn't sure if I'd measure up to them. But they were, as it turns out, just human beings like I was. And it was a hell of an adventure, I mean, I have to say. So I think it was the first race at Magny-Cours as well, or modern day race at Magny-Cours.
How did the opportunity come about with Benetton?
So I had worked at a place called Adams McCall Engineering in High Wycombe, and there was a company called Tiger Race Cars, which was Tim Schenken and Howden Ganley, and I helped out wherever I could, race weekends, this kind of bits and pieces. And there was a mechanic there called Kenny Hankamer, and I just happened to be at a petrol station one evening putting petrol in my car, and Kenny pulled up alongside. I haven't seen you for ages, but what are you doing? Working at Benetton now. I was like, well, okay, any jobs? He said, well, I think there might be. So then I think 2 days later I got a call from Nigel Stepney, and I arrived for a job interview in Wheatley. I think I nearly lost the job interview at the same time because the car park was sheet ice and I spun on the way in and nearly hit Nigel's car, but very low speed. But actually I think he was quite impressed with the way I pirouetted. The car ended up parked almost perfectly and I just stepped out of it as if nothing happened.
And of course that's Kenny Hankamer, who you worked with at Red Bull many years later. That's one of the friendships, I guess, that you talk about. How were the cars back in 91? How sophisticated were they? How difficult was it for a young Jonathan Wheatley to get his head around it all?
I think the first thing was they were incredibly well designed, so better than anything else that I'd worked on before that. I seem to remember that it was a very tricky car to work on, the B191, because it was designed for active suspension, but that never actually happened. So where the dampers were hidden in the front was very, very difficult to get to. And the kind of changes that you had to make the car back in the day with packer clearances and all these things, it wasn't straightforward. And if the driver was in the car, it was impossible. So we were constantly coming up with workarounds and clever systems to be able to do that. They were relatively unsophisticated compared with what we have now. But, they were of their era, and I thought they were beautiful. I thought all of those cars of that 90s period were beautiful.
You say of the era, right? How different was that era compared to 2025? We now have curfews and we look after our people. Am I right? We look after our people better now as a sport than we did 30 odd years ago.
Yeah.
And how intense was it?
Well, I'd like, talking about the sort of curfews and looking after people, I'd like to think I was part of that process, and I put some energy into that process with Charlie Whiting and Andy Stevenson, Steve Nielsen, some of the other contemporary team managers at the time, because it wasn't sustainable what we were doing. And the era that I grew up in, we had 3 cars in the garage, no curfews, you changed engines all the time because you could. It was hard graft. We weren't as well organised. I think there were about 25 of us at the track. That was everyone, drivers, catering, marketing, everybody. You hung around a long time waiting for job lists and set up sheets and bits and pieces like that. It was more social, I think, back then, because you were waiting for information. You'd wander up and down the pit lane having chats. I made a lot of friendships then that I still have now. You look back at that era of Benetton, Dave Redding, he's now sporting director or team manager at Williams. There's so many people from that era, Pat Simmons, Ross Brawn, so many people from Benetton in that era are in senior roles still in Formula One.
And you would regularly pull an all-nighter, right?
Yeah, we would do all-nighters quite a lot, and we were sort of 23, 24, full of energy. We'd then If you weren't doing an all-nighter, you saw it as an opportunity to go to a nightclub. You know, there wasn't a big drinking culture, but there was a big, you know, work hard, play hard philosophy, and there was a great energy at Benetton back then.
Well, let's talk about a man who brought a lot of energy to the team, because after only a handful of races, Roberto Moreno gets turfed out and Michael Schumacher comes in for the Italian Grand Prix. You and Michael, same kind of age. What sort of impression did Schumacher make on you early on?
We hit it off straight away. I mean, on the front end mechanics role, you have to get on really well with the driver. There has to be a good rapport there and what have you. And we hit it off straight away. He brought an energy again to the team, and I guess he was the first driver who was really, really interested in the fit and finish of his car. He was looking at performance in every single area, and that drove the team on. You know, he was kind of talisman, if you like, for the team. And the energy he put in, we felt that we should be putting in as well. So I think, you know, we were a team kind of waiting for a transition, and Michael brought that with him. And, you know, there was a great energy. You know, you had Pat Simmons there, Rory Byrne, Ross Brawn, and Flavio, you know. He was terrifying back then. But, you know, you suddenly felt you were going somewhere.
And when I say what made Michael Schumacher special, is it the attention to detail that you've just mentioned, or was there something else?
I think it's on the human side. You know, years later, he still remembered your kids' names. Years later, he'd give you an hour in the paddock just to chat when he was, you know, one of the most high-profile people in sport, not just in Formula One. He cared about people, and you genuinely felt that. And he was a family man. He cares about his family, and you could feel that as well. Very easy person to warm to and start to pack around, because I think the media in certain areas wanted to create this villain type role. And he really wasn't that. If you got to know him, and you probably understand that he had a slight guard up with the media, but actually with the team, he was himself.
Leads us on to Adelaide 94.
Remind me?
That looks, Schumacher's off. Schumacher's lost time. Yeah. Hill goes by.
Oh, out goes Schumacher. The German is out of the Australian Grand Prix, and Damon Hill only has to keep going to be world champion of 1994, but can he keep going? Damon Hill retires from the Australian Grand Prix, and the 1994 World Championship has been won by Michael Schumacher.
We felt throughout the whole season that we were under attack. So in a team, you get defensive and you put the shield wall up around the outside of it. We felt we were under attack the whole time. So many things, from disqualifications in Spa and, you know, the fuel fire in Hockenheim, allegations of this, that and everything else all the time. And you just hunkered down as a team, locked in stronger. And I think there was a tension, there was an energy about it. There was a chance to win a world championship in Adelaide in 1994, and my recollection of it was watching it pan out on TV, almost like you weren't involved. It was the weirdest sort of outer dimensional sort of feeling. And then that feeling when you realise you'd won a world championship, and we're a young team, you know. There was an explosion. It was like all the tension that had been building up was released. And there's some fantastic photos of us in the garage after when Michael came back in, and champagne spraying everywhere and what have you. And I think it was just that you feel like you're in a war footing, and then suddenly it's all over. And I can remember that feeling even now.
You're still a young man at this point, right? And 94 must have been a year in which you grew up a lot, because of course there was everything you've just mentioned about Benetton, but of course there was Ayrton Senna's death earlier in the year as well. Would you, if you were to pinpoint one season that had the biggest impression on you, might it be 94?
Without a shadow of a doubt. So, you know, I got married in 1994 as well, so I got engaged in 93. This was really big year in my life. But more than that, so I told you I grew up in karting, and nobody really had made it from karting to Formula One that I could remember my heroes reading these magazines when I was a kid. And Ayrton was a name that just kept coming up. Ayrton Senna won this race, won that race in karting. Then suddenly he's in this path towards Formula One, and I followed his career, you know, Formula Ford 2000, Formula 3, that incredible season of Formula 3 with Martin Brundle. He was my hero. And then suddenly I'm in the garage next to him in Formula One. And we had this kind of ongoing relationship in '94 where Michael would set a pole position. And then when Ayrton would come out of the garage, I'd show him the pit board with Michael's time on it. And he'd like open his visor, shake his head, close it. He'd come in, go faster than Michael, and he'd be looking at me for the pit board to say, well, where's my time? You know, so there was this camaraderie that maybe people aren't aware of. You know, you're not just in fierce competition with people, you're rubbing up against them. So yeah, Imola '94 was the worst weekend I can ever remember, I think. I can still remember the emotions now. I've kept clippings, I don't know why, you know, I came across them the other day when I was moving house. Kept a lot of stuff from '94 because I think for me as a young man, that was a major turning point, you know. I can still remember Mick Cowlishaw, who was the chief mechanic, coming up to me and putting his hand on my arm because he knew the relationship I had and how I thought of it, and telling me he'd gone. You know, that weekend was full of so many things, you know. I think Ruben's crash, where he puts his hands in front of his face, that image is incredible. It just shows the human being inside the car. Then, you know, Roland, I mean, I can remember seeing that on TV and immediately understanding this was not a normal accident. This was really, really serious. Then in the race, you know, JJ stalling on the grid, that massive impact that caused the red flag. Then Alboreto lost his wheel in the pit lane, and the wheel nut hit my number one mechanic at the time, cut his leg. The wheel went into, I think it was the Lotus pit, where it hit somebody in there. I can remember that. I mean, the bottom line is, then Senna's accident in the race, we didn't want to get on the plane. I can remember we were sat around the airport lounge, it was silence. The Williams guys had just been told about Ayrton, and none of us wanted to get on the plane. What's the next thing that's going to happen?
Horrific time. Let's focus on some positives now. In that, almost unique to you, I think, is the number of drivers you've helped to their first world titles. I'm thinking of Schumacher in '94, Alonso in 2005, Sebastian Vettel in 2010, Max Verstappen in 2021. What do all of these guys share?
I think they all have a magic that if they sniff the possibility of a victory, they can deliver it. They can pull otherworldly skills out. They're all able to read a race from the cockpit. They're able to deliver strategies that you think are impossible to deliver. Over the course of a race season, when so many things can go wrong, they always come out on top. Wet weather, crashes, punctures, they come out on top. They just deliver. And just when you think you've seen the best drive that you're ever going to see, these guys are capable of doing something that just leaves you astounded.
Their talents all shine bright. Whose shines brightest, do you think, of the names I've just mentioned?
I think, like many things, it's the latest one, the newest one that you're working with is the one where you would naturally feel. So for me, I think Max embodies everything that a racing driver needs. You know, I've loved working with him. It was an incredible journey at Red Bull. We didn't get everything right. You know, he and I have had some tough conversations over the years as well. But I've been astounded by some of the things he's done in a car. And I still am. You know, I still sit there and watch it sometimes and go, wow, I don't know if anyone else can do that.
I mean, even Suzuka just a few races back.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I messaged him straight after the race, and he came straight back as well, you know.
And of course, Jonathan, his dad drove a Benetton when you were at the team. Do you see any parallels between Max and his dad, or is Max just another level?
I always thought with Jos that there was a missed opportunity. You know, he was incredibly talented, and he still is. I mean, he's winning and rallying now. You know what I mean? If Jos turns his mind to something and really, really concentrate, I mean, he's got an incredible ability, and that natural ability, obviously, Max shares with him. I think nearly everything else about how they operate, they're very, very different people. But you know, I'm proud to call Jos a friend. I'm proud to call Max a friend.
Can we discuss the importance of drivers in a team? Because when Schumacher left Benetton at the end of '95, and he took a bunch of people with him, and the team then had a difficult, nigh on decade, really, didn't it? If Max were to leave Red Bull, do you think something similar would happen there? Do these guys have whatever it is they've got, that when it goes, it's a vacuum that takes a while to fill?
Well, if you look at Sebastian, maybe as an example, there's an adjustment. You know, I firmly believe that every single member of the team is important. You know, I've had a cleaner come up to me with a piece of car part back in my days at Renault and say, I found this on the floor last night. It turned out that we'd been making some bolts out of the wrong material, and the head had come off of it. Yeah, every single person plays a vital role in the team, and I genuinely believe that. And the drivers as well, because the drivers, they're the forefront of what you do. You put everything you put together, the driver has to deliver on track, you know. And if you look at Sebastian, when he left, there was a moment when Red Bull had to find its feet again. You know, but fortunately Max came along, and then you build on the momentum again. But I think, you know, drivers leaving teams, teams readapting, I think it's entirely natural part of the process. Otherwise, McLaren would still be world champions every single year since since Prost and Senna era.
Jonathan, it's so clear that you are the ultimate racer. I feel, speaking to you now, that you're in the perfect job.
Yeah, well, I feel it, honestly. I feel reinvigorated. You don't realise sometimes what you need to do in terms of pushing yourself personally. I'm tremendously lucky. My family have supported my career all the way through. I've been able to just focus on this incredible job, this incredible sport that I work in. And I now find myself in a situation where I really feel that I can help this team. You know, and what more could you ask for in a managerial role other than the ability to get the best out of the people around you, show them a route that maybe they could follow, and try to lead people on a journey. I mean, for me personally, this is the most exciting part of my career in the last 10 years.
I mean, your passion is so infectious. At what point in your life did you think, I would actually like to be a team principal? Is it something you've aimed at for a while, or is it just one thing led to another, and here we are?
It's interesting because, and you probably won't believe me, but I've been largely unambitious in my life.
No, I don't believe you. You're bang on right there.
I've been more ambitious for doing the best I can for the team that I work in the role that I'm doing, you know. When I was a number 2 mechanic even, I thought maybe I'll do Formula 1 for a couple of years. It sucked me in. I've loved the competition, I suppose. I've loved the working with teams. And I guess I felt I had a transition in my career where I could possibly have stayed doing what I was doing, or probably have stayed what I was doing, or try the next level. What am I capable of? What can I bring to the sport? What could my career look like? And honestly, I didn't deliberate very long over it, Tom. You know, it took me a long time to decide to leave Renault to go to Red Bull. This project, the reason I'm sat here in front of you now, it felt right from the very beginning.
You mentioned leaving Renault, going to Red Bull. You actually left Renault when they were at the peak of their powers, winning world championships with Fernando Alonso. Explain that, how difficult it is to leave a winning team and go to one that was effectively a startup still.
I think you're probably starting to see a pattern in my career now. It's about the opportunity that you're offered. You know, the opportunity that Red Bull offered me it wasn't going to be available for me at Renault. And I wanted to test myself. I transformed a test team, I transformed a race team. But the idea of going somewhere with a group of people that I might know 5 people in the whole company and being able to create a team that I wanted to work in, a team where I was surrounded by people who shared the same views and philosophy and racing spirit as I did, it was an offer too good to choose and too good to refuse. And it took me a while because it felt like my family. It felt like I was leaving one family and starting something new. There's a guilt associated with that as well. But now I look back on it, I don't know why it took so long to decide, because the opportunity was amazing.
How important are your experiences at Red Bull in particular in creating the person I'm with now, the manager that you are now?
It's a really interesting question, actually. And I suppose I didn't know what I was capable of when I left Renault to go to Red Bull. I didn't know. I thought I could do it. I was, again, confident that I could do it, but I didn't know. And I think the difference now is I know I can do this, and I know I can support this team and help this team, and I know I can be a part of this team's history in a positive way. And I think this is where the excitement comes from, because I'm keen to prove that.
Two things I feel really shone bright when you were at Red Bull. One was your ability to transform the race team, and that sort of manifested itself in the pit stops. And then there was also your unflinching knowledge of the sporting regulations. Let's start talking about pit stops, and how do you get 22 people to sing off the same hymn sheet and create a pit stop that is 1.8 seconds or whatever the fastest was? That the fastest you ever did? I think it was
1.82. Yeah. Well, firstly, I think that pit stop performance is almost a manifestation of team spirit, because you've got 22 people. They all think differently. They all come from different backgrounds. They all have different ambitions and drives and pressures and problems in their life. You have to create an environment where those people can perform again and again, that they can deal with pressure. They have the confidence to believe that they're the best in what they're doing. I've done every one of those jobs. I've been them. You know, it's funny, when I spoke to the factory when I started this job, I thought I've been stood there with a new team principal stood in front of me saying all of these things. You know, I've lived it. And I've lived with race teams my whole life. And I think the pit stop performance, it's not about the equipment. As long as the equipment's just about there, it's about the ethos in the team, it's about the spirit in the team. And I'm hoping that we can do a similar job here.
You talk about team spirit and ethos, and I'm also reminded of Hungary 2020, when Max crashed on the way to the grid and the team rebuilt the left-hand side of that car on the grid. I mean, it was an extraordinary thing. Is that one of your proudest moments? It showed everything that Red Bull was.
Absolutely. I'm glad you chose that as an example, because imagine how many people have to perform at the highest level for that to happen. You know, there's the mechanics that you see on the grid swarming over the car. There's the parts coming backwards and forwards. There's the clarity and communication. There's the belief in the team that I had that we could do this. I mean, don't forget, this was during COVID, so there were fewer people on the grid. There was a shorter grid procedure because you didn't have guests on there. There'd be loads of time to do it now, but there wasn't then. And the communication with the team, I got a real buzz from that. I was totally calm in the moment. I had no doubt we could achieve it. And I sat there trying to help coordinate it, make sure the jobs were happening, make sure communications were clear going through. But the team delivered it.
They really did, didn't they? And did you have both teams' mechanics working on Max's?
I think we even had mechanics from other teams working on it at one point. It was a complete team effort. And I haven't looked back at it. Maybe I should look back at it, but it was probably the most intense period, 30-minute period of my entire Formula One career.
It was an inspiring moment. It also leads me to ask, how do you keep a lid on the competition between the two cars in your team? And sometimes at Red Bull it boiled over, didn't it, between the two camps? I'm thinking of Turkey 2010 when Vettel and Webber had their moment, Multi 21 a few years later. Is all calm between the mechanics on the two sides? And is it just the drivers, or is there inevitably competition?
Well, we're talking about management again, really. There's never been a competition between car crews and a team that I've run, because that's not how it works. We're one team. We have two drivers. The goal is team performance overall. And it's about managing all those situations, multi-21.
Sebastian, multi-map 2-1, multi-map 2-1.
Oh, Sebastian, you need to give him the space. Hold position. This is silly, Seb, come on.
And the team bosses are very much saying, do not run into each other.
Yep, that's good, super.
Okay, Mark, he was told.
Mark Webber regains the lead, but the battle is not over yet, and there is barely a metre between the two cars as down the hill they plunge, and side by side onwards towards the braking zone in turn 4.
Multi-21's in. Yeah, multi-21.
For those of you that don't know what that means, that meant you should finish in order car 2 and car 1, so 21. Those of you who remember, it ended up at multi-12, unfortunately. But then in the aftermath of that, you've got one driver who had made a decision on track that he had to live with then for the rest of his life, and you had another driver who felt aggrieved. And I can remember that Mark absolutely was not up for coming to the debrief. And I thought, as my role as team manager at the time, I need to convince him to come to the debrief, because we needed to get both drivers' side of the story, and we needed to get it out and in the open and dealt with before we moved on to the next event. So I spent a bit of time with Mark, and I managed to convince him to come to the debrief. It wasn't the most comfortable such meeting, as you probably imagine, but I think it was part of the process of healing and moving forwards.
Interestingly, at the time, Sebastian was very apologetic. Then we turned up in China a few days later, and he was defiant that I won the race. Next question, please.
I think he probably had to decide what his position was, didn't he?
But that wasn't influenced by the management. That was a Vettel decision, was it?
Well, if there was a conversation telling him to do that, I can't imagine how it would happen. I'm pretty sure he had to decide what his thought process was going into the next race, and he was very clear about it, as you say.
Now, Jonathan, another aspect to you that is hugely impressive is your knowledge of the sporting regulations. How much has that helped you over the years?
Well, I would say, first of all, one of the big concerns I had moving from Renault to Red Bull was I suddenly had to be an expert on sporting regulations, and I wasn't. I spent, I don't know how many hours reading the sporting regulations, trying to understand them. I was incredibly fortunate that in the sporting group at the time, so I represented Red Bull at the sporting working group, it was called, and then it was the sporting advisory committee and various other committees. I got to work with some legends like Dave Ryan from McLaren and Stefano Domenicali when he was representing Ferrari, and of course my dear friend Charlie Whiting. And like anything, when I don't understand it and I'm concerned that I'm not well prepared, I revise, I look into it. And I think even last year, in my role as sporting director, I would still read the sporting regulations every race weekend, through from start to finish.
Every
single race
how many
weekend.
Pages? Just give us an idea.
I don't know, more than there should be. I don't know, more than there should be. I wouldn't read the bit about how many towels are supposed to be in the post-race ceremony and what have you.
That was just it was almost to reassure yourself that you were on top of it. Is that
Have I missed something? Is there something I've forgotten about the last weekend? What could happen? What scenario? What would you do in this scenario? I spent my career looking at things happening to other teams. So what would I do? What would I do if that happens? What if this mad thing happens, like a crash on the way to the grid with Max? What would I do if the race hadn't started yet and a driver had crashed on his way to the grid, like with Checo? What would I do if a driver is almost certainly going to get a penalty carried over from one race to the next race? What would I do? And I tore myself inside out over that for 19 years.
So if I say to you, right, we're going back to school, 36.3, can you tell me what that reg is?
Now, the You're putting me on the spot here. The numbering of the sporting regulations has changed quite a lot, but I think that's the refueling, right? Yeah. So that came about because we'd banned refueling. You could refuel at quite a high rate, and we were used to, in our normal operations, fueling the car in a really short period of time. I think we wanted to save ourselves from ourselves, so we put a fuel rate in, which meant that you couldn't use fast refueling rigs anymore.
Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world!
Jonathan, Abu Dhabi 2021, the day Max won his first world title. How do you reflect on that race?
So, we're in a hunt for a world championship. I can't tell you what that's like, you know? It's what every single moment of you going to work, every single second of you not spending time with your wife and children, all the travelling, everything, this is what it's all led up to. This is the pinnacle of motorsport. You have a chance to win a world championship. And the pit wall is full of competitive people, otherwise you wouldn't be there. We had a problem with Checo's car, so I remember I was really busy on the intercom internally. We were dealing with retiring his car. It wasn't a straightforward retirement. Then there's this accident. And the biggest thing is, are we boxing, aren't we boxing? You know, is Max coming in for tyres? Isn't he coming in? There's a bit of talk about that. Bang, we come in for tyres. And then at the same time, you can see that there's a load of lap cars out there, and you're thinking, and I'll be honest with you, I wasn't 100% sure what lap we were on. All I knew about was I wanted everything cleaned up as quickly as possible and get racing. The race was restarted, Max won, and we're celebrating.
Of the 19 titles that you've been involved with, is that the most special, that 21 season? Because it felt, at least from where I was sitting, that we had two teams at the top of their game. We had two drivers in Lewis and Max at the top of their game. Did it feel like that on the inside? Did you feel that people at Red Bull, at least, were working harder, putting in longer hours because they were being carried along by it?
Every single one of those championship seasons has been incredibly special for its own reasons. I really struggled to pick one particular one. I think what's common to every team in every single one of these situations is the amount of effort that people are prepared to put in, the spirit that goes in from the team side to support a championship campaign. Everyone stretches themselves, everyone delivers beyond where they think they're capable of delivering. And yeah, it's hard to pick one out in particular.
How much does a championship campaign take out of a race team? And I asked this in the context of Damon Hill, actually, in that he was saying that it took a lot out of him, and one of the things he really admired about Michael Schumacher was how he could perform at that level year in, year out. He seemed to be impervious to the pressure and everything that comes with it. Are race teams the same? Does it sap energy from you?
We find ourselves talking at a time when it's a 24 race calendar. It's about managing fatigue. It's about managing the spirit of the team over a period of time like that when people are getting tired. It's about thinking about how you adapt and overcome all of these solutions. And I think the driver is a talisman, you know, their preparation, the way they arrive. I mean, drivers get tired, we all get tired, you know. I think the best of the best are able to just have this incredible energy about them. And I always say to my team, said, if we've done our job right, then the summer break, you collapse. And Christmas, you collapse, rebuild, and you come back again.
Well, let's end our chat, bringing it back to Sauber, and just your goals now for the rest of 2025. What do you want to achieve with this team?
We've really got to get ourselves on the journey of the transformation that we need to become a big team. So what I mean by that is we need to start thinking like a big team. We need to start getting people on the journey towards looking at the problems that we're going to face in the future, putting the foundations and the cornerstones in now for building the strong team that we're going to need. We need to be guiding people, identifying talent in the business. We need to be creating this energy. We need to be driving forwards, and we need to have measurable gains along the way. We need to understand the steps we're making, and we need to hit those targets. And, you know, it's exciting. And I think if we get the right energy behind us, then we can shortcut this journey, with this incredibly ambitious journey we have, to the goals that we have, which is, we're not messing around. We're here to win races and world championships.
Look, you talk about measurable gains in the short term. What do they look like? Are you talking lap time, or are you actually talking about structure and everything going on back at base?
I think there are measurables at every single level. I mean, the wonderful thing about Formula One, and maybe why I'm still so excited about it, is you measure yourself against the best in the business 24 weekends a year, right? And you come away with a result, whether that's good or bad. You come away with the result. You know where you are. There's no hiding from it. It's public, it's there. Every qualifying session, every race, you're measured. But inside the team, we can see the measurables that we have. I sit here now, the midfield fight that we're in is unbelievably close. We've missed out on Q2 by 700ths of a second. I mean, do you see what I mean? Our goal has to be a regular participant in Q2. And our goal has to be the team that's ready to score points.
And tell me about this technical centre that you're going to build in the UK. Is that a goal for this year as well, to get that up and running?
I think it shows the scale of ambition in the project. There's an understanding that motorsport belt, where I've spent my life in the UK, has some incredible talent, and for over 50 years it's drawn talent to it. So we want to be able to recruit from that area, but also to move your family to a different country. I've been through that process. It's not straightforward, so it's kind of an onboarding centre as well, if you like, a sort of the first step on the bridge that will lead you into Switzerland. So I'm hoping that we're in a position to announce something relatively shortly.
But what will that facility look like? Is that where we're going to see future Audi Formula One cars being designed, or will that take place in Switzerland?
So Switzerland will always be the base of the Audi F1 project, and Neuburg with the engine. This is what we see as an absolutely necessary link in the chain to the ambitious program we have for the team.
And just out of interest, have you had lots of CVs through the door since you've been TP?
There's a tremendous excitement around the project and some surprising CVs.
Tell us more. Look, you mentioned Audi and 2026. Just how difficult is that going to be for the Team 26? Audi Neuburg is starting from scratch. You're competing against power unit manufacturers that have years of experience in Formula One. Is it possible, do you think, to come in and have a world-beating PU from year one?
Well, I think everything's possible. I like the way Mattia puts things. So where people might describe a challenge, he describes it as an opportunity. And I suspect there's going to be many, many opportunities where we can prove ourselves over the 26, 27, 28, 29. It's a long journey. Our approach is humble. We have a huge amount of respect for the competitors we're up against, and we're doing everything we can to enter at the right level.
Jonathan, what a brilliant chat. Thank you so much for your time. There's one final question. This is something I'm asking everybody on the pod this year. Formula One celebrates its 75th birthday this year. Do you have a favourite moment in those 75 years?
I think it has to be the championship win in Adelaide in 1994, because it was a season where you felt you were under siege, you were embattled, and the explosion of joy at the end of it and the partying afterwards. And that era, in that city, in that town, unbelievable. And that for me will always stick with me.
Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you very much.